We talk about talking trains a lot on his channel, mostly Thomas trains, and also some non-talking trains like in Star Wars. But there is another franchise that I have always wanted to dive into here, and that is Transformers. I love the Transformers franchise. I admit I am rather late. I first got into it after seeing Transformers 1 in theaters out of curiosity, and I've been hooked ever since. After that, I got into watching all of G1 cartoon, Transformers Prime, and I even caught up with the current Skybound comic run. I love Transformers. And as you can imagine, models of these characters will be made, eventually. As of right now, I have made 5 Autobots: Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, Blur, and Centurion. I don't really have an AU story for these models, more so just designs because I feel like they look cool. Hence why they're not exact to any official design, but I do plan on making many more though. These are really fun to make. But for now, let's just dive into how I made these 5 models of the Autobots. And we'll start with Blur. Blur is one of my favorites of the franchise. In a way, he's kind of like the Porter of Transformers. Kind of underused, but also very unique in a way too. But he also just stay on the side during most of the story. He's also just so funny. Blur was a model that I finished the most recently out of these Autobots, and searching for an alt mode for him was rather difficult. I did not want to use just a regular model of a car for him, or something that's like too similar to Bumblebee and Cliffjumper. I also wanted a design that conveyed speed without being some super fancy high-end car. That was when I came across the 1968 Alfa Romeo 33.2. This is an old school race car, and man, this is a beauty of a car. I just love how it looks, and there are plenty of HO scale models of it on the market. I found a solid red one for a good price, and went forward with it. Painting was the easiest process of any model I've ever had. I was actually able to take this car apart pretty easily, and I was able to paint the shell without having to be mindful of the window pieces, which made it so much easier. I first used a light blue paint pen for the base color, instead of just going with a primer. And this worked way better than I thought, maybe because the paint pen is oil based, as the coating was very smooth and even, and it was also the exact light blue I wanted, so that worked out pretty well too. I then used Barrel's Cobalt Hue for the secondary color. For the dark blue, I just used a toothpick for it, as the surface area is very small and the brush it wouldn't let the paint stick at all. But I just kept globbing it on very carefully and trying to smooth it out, and I managed to get it there. Only a few touch-ups here and there were needed, and then I brushed on a matte finish made by Mod Podge. After a quick reassembly and application of the Autobot insignias on the hood, Blur was done. Fun fact, the insignias were actually very late additions, as I recently got a sticker decal sheet with the 2 factions on them, and so I added them all to my previous models. Now we move on to Cliffjumper. Cliffjumper is known for being the one who dies early on in most timelines and shows and other projects. But in the Skybound comic run, he actually lives on, and they do so much with him, and I honestly love it. In most iterations, Cliffjumper is basically Bumblebee's clone when it comes to design. In G1 and Skybound to an extent, and I think the Bumblebee movie too, where they just make him a red Bumblebee. I don't mind this too much, but they are not related as far as I'm aware, and I wanted something a little bit different looking from Bumblebee. Hence why I went with the 1994 Porsche 911 Carrera 2. This is a pretty nice car, and it has a unique outline, and I bought a purple model of it, and then painted it solid red. It was honestly quite easy, although I couldn't get it apart for painting, which made it slightly more difficult. Then again, Cliffjumper has always had a very simple design, just solid red, so that was basically it. After applying the Autobot insignias, Cliffjumper was done. And now, onto Centurion. You are probably wondering, who the hell is Centurion? Well, this character originates from the Hearts of Steel comic run published by IDW. Hearts of Steel was originally a standalone story where the Transformers landed on Earth during the Industrial Revolution in the United States. I have yet to read any of the IDW comics for Transformers, but I've heard it was really good. In the Transformers IDW run, it was revealed that the Hearts of Steel Elseworlds, I guess, story was actually a part of the main timeline the entire time, as they revealed that Optimus, Bumblebee, etc. were merely similar-looking Maximals from some Cybertronian colony planet that Shockwave purposely wiped the memories of and had crashed on Earth as a messed-up test run for Cybertronians landed on Earth. So Hearts of Steel Bumblebee was really a Maximal named Centurion all along. After that storyline concluded, Centurion roamed around a lot, changing alt modes frequently, and working with various groups. And then eventually had his consciousness fused with the superhero Atomic Man, creating a whole new mental being, I guess. Yeah, Centurion is mentally fucked. But eventually, he ended up joining the Autobots, and was involved in the story from there, at least in some capacity. But that's all I know about this character. But this character always fascinated me when I first read about it. Mostly because he was a train at first, and actually lasted beyond just one single storyline, and did surprisingly decent amount of stuff. And so I decided to make a model of him, as I've never seen anyone else do it, so I figured it'd be fun. I searched endlessly for a model that somewhat resembled his look in the original comic. Centurion's tank engine alt mode isn't really based on anything in real life, especially with two funnels on the front, but he is an 040 saddle tank, so that was at least a start. My search eventually led me to this little switcher model, and got to work once it arrived. I took the whole model apart, and got to paint it. I decided to take the valve gear off to paint it, and also to resolve mechanical issues, although those issues came later. I then primed the body, and then applied Albero's King Gold to the cab and other parts. I then used a Dremel to remove the molded on Westinghouse pump on the side. The same thing happened with these little step things on the side as well. I just wanted to make the model look a little less standard looking. I then sanded off the areas smooth, and then painted them in black. I originally painted the pistons in all yellow, but I didn't really like how it looked, so I just repainted them black, and then painted these piston drum things silver to add a bit more color variety. And I also painted the running board sides red. Again, this isn't really a trait on any of the figures, but I feel this adds a little more color variety. It breaks up monotony in just having the yellow and black. Next was to paint the wheels yellow. A fairly easy process, but the latter half of this section was what drove me nuts. We'll get back to that later. I initially wanted to stick with a single funnel, like for more realism, but eventually I decided to remove it as I wasn't really seeing Centurion while making this for a while, and decided to 3D print some new ones. I just whipped up a quick model in Tinkercad and printed a bunch, and then glued them into place. I then shifted back to the chassis. The model didn't run due to the wire connecting the pickups to the motor being severed for some reason, and so I had to take the motion apart and carefully solder that wire back in. This was very hard since the only soldering kit I have is a giant one meant for larger projects. So it felt like having to use one of those comically large pencils to do a little checkbox on like a sticky note. It was very tedious, and it ended up with this nasty soldering blob, which I could not get any smaller without the wire coming out again. So I decided to just keep it and just bend the side rods around it. But eventually I was able to get it to work. We have life, oh. And man, that was euphoric actually testing it, and it actually worked. I then put the valve gear back in. After that, I printed and painted a snowplow for Centurion. This is meant to be a representative of his chunky cowcatcher he has in the comics and the Hearts of Steel Bumblebee figure. I then decided to dry brush the model with silver to give it some more weathering and to hide the imperfections. I also feel this gives it a worn down look. After a clear coat and then the Autobot insignias on the sides, Centurion was finally done. Somehow he was the most difficult out of all my Autobots, at least so far. But I love him regardless. Alright, my favorite Transformers glove shell. And now we segue into how I made Bumblebee. Bumblebee was made using an HO scale model of the New Beetle RSI. This is basically a regular modern Volkswagen Beetle, but with a spoiler and higher performance stats. And it looks pretty cool. I find this a good middle ground between the classic Beetle of G1 and the Camaro alt mold of the movies. I found a model on eBay and then got to work. Using toothpicks, I painted the whole model in yellow. This was very tedious as the paint would not stay when using a brush, and using toothpicks and just globbing it on bit by bit was the only way I can get it to stay. This took multiple coats everywhere. It was pretty tedious. But eventually, I was able to get it even. I then went in with black to paint the hoods and smaller details. I then repainted the lights and then clear coated him. And later on, I added the Autobot insignia on his hood. And that's basically it. Bumblebee was done after that. And now we transition to the big one. The one you've all been waiting for. The greatest leader in all of fiction. Optimus Prime. My model of Optimus Prime is pretty dead on to his Gen 1 design. You just can't go wrong with the Kenworth 100. I found a white K100 model on eBay, and once it arrived, I got to painting. I first primed the tractor in gray, and I began painting Optimus's body itself. Me personally, I've always liked my Optimus Prime designs with a bit extra red on them, and so I painted the trailer red, at least in the front part. The rest was painted in Apple Barrel's Timeless Gray. I think it turned out pretty well. I then painted a few bits on the main body in white, and made a few details in red as well. The truck frames were already blue out the gate, so I just left them on. I then painted this little blue strip along the bottom of the trailer for some more color variety on it. After a clear coat, Optimus Prime was initially done. And for about a year or so, he just sat like this. But again, recently, I bought that decal sheet with insignias on it. And so I applied 2 to Optimus. Or 4 actually, as he's a trailer. And this really lifts the model. It just does, it looks so good. But after that, he was fully complete. With that, we have finally covered all of my HO scale models of the Transformers. And I 100% plan on making many more Autobots. Currently, I would like to start working on RC and Greenlight at some point. And also some Decepticons as well. In fact, I've already finished a Decepticon, although you'll see him very soon. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all same time next week.